They had no idea, not the slightest clue about who they were dealing with when they tried to manipulate you. When the narcissist believed they could twist your mind, dim your spirit, and control your emotions, they truly thought their schemes were clever. They assumed you would remain confused, stay loyal, stay trapped in the web they spun with charm, deception, and empty promises. They believed you were too kind, too trusting, too forgiving to ever see through the mask they wore. But what they didn't understand is that every lie they told, every time they gaslit you, every effort to rewrite your reality only revealed them more clearly. Narcissists never realize this. When you attempt to break someone who is genuine, someone who loves fully, someone who gives without expecting anything in return, you don't just hurt them, you expose your own emptiness. You show the world the hollowness behind your smile, the fractures in your illusion. At first, they felt powerful. They thought they had you under their control. They assumed they had won because you doubted yourself, because you stayed silent, because you tried to repair what they kept breaking. But manipulating a good soul works differently. You don't walk away unchanged. You lose the very energy you depended on. You destroy the only person who ever saw you as more than your ego. You survived their cycles. You endured the confusion. You walked through the emotional storms they created. Meanwhile, they remain trapped in the same hollow patterns, chasing the next person to drain, the next life to feed their fragile sense of self. They assumed you would stay down. They assumed you would never realize your worth. They mistook your patience for weakness and your kindness for blindness. But you were never blind, just hopeful. You were never weak, just caring. You were never theirs to control. You were simply giving them a chance they never earned. And now they watch you rise, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with clarity, with strength, with a peace they will never know. You broke free, and they stayed exactly where they always were, behind the mask they cannot live without. They see you rebuilding, rising, healing into someone they never imagined you could become, because their vision of you was always limited by their own ego. Narcissists cannot see past themselves. They only ever saw you as a resource, something to drain. But now they see what you truly were: irreplaceable, rare, deep, and real. They didn't just lose a person, they lost the one person who gave them love, loyalty, and emotional depth they will never find again. And that is what haunts them now. They didn't manipulate someone ordinary. They tried to manipulate you. That is the root of their downfall. The harm narcissists cause doesn't end when the moment passes. It echoes. It reshapes their own identity. At first, they deny the truth. They tell themselves you were too sensitive, that you expected too much, that you misunderstood them. They invent stories to justify their cruelty, but those lies cannot last forever. Reality creeps in quietly, relentlessly. It whispers when they are alone, when the mask slips, when the room goes silent. It hits hardest when they see you thriving, not in spite of them, but because you escaped them. What narcissists never realize is that manipulation is a one-way trade. They exchanged your authenticity for their ego, your loyalty for their insecurity, your trust for a fleeting sense of power. In doing so, they curse themselves with the emptiness they tried to put onto you. You rebuild slowly but surely. They unravel quietly, inevitably. You didn't seek revenge. You didn't try to expose them. You didn't stoop to their level. You let life handle the reckoning, and life has a ruthless way of balancing things. What they spread into the world, deception, emotional sabotage, lies, comes back to them slowly, methodically, relentlessly. They end up trapped in the chaos they created. Their breakdown is never loud at first. Narcissistic decay starts in private. Relationships crumble. People stop trusting them. Patterns repeat. They become strangers to themselves because you cannot build a life on selfishness and manipulation. And maybe they smile in public. Maybe they laugh louder than anyone else. But there's emptiness behind it now, a shadow. They know what they did. They know what they lost. And there's no way to undo it. That's the curse of narcissistic abuse. Once they lose a truly loving soul, they never fully recover. But you were not destroyed. You were transformed. You carry scars, yes, but they are proof of your strength, clarity, and awakening. You didn't retaliate. You rose. And that rise is the punishment they never imagined. Let them live in the world they built. Let them drown in the silence that follows the exit of the one who loved them sincerely. Let them feel the emptiness of losing someone they never deserved in the first place. Their manipulation wasn't a mistake, it was a revelation, revealing who they truly are and confirming who you always were. And now, as you continue to grow with peace, discipline, and unshakable self-worth, they watch from a distance that will never close. Narcissists always think they can return whenever they want, but not this time. Not with you. They had no idea that trying to control you would be the very thing that exposed them. Now they know. When a narcissist manipulates someone genuine, they don't just harm that person, they destroy the last real connection they will ever have. They think it's just a moment, a tactic they can justify. But emotional abuse isn't a single act. It's a fracture in their own soul, and it spreads inside them, quietly poisoning everything. You cannot manipulate someone without betraying yourself. The mind knows, the conscience knows. Even if buried under arrogance, excuses, or false confidence, it lingers, it festers. It waits for quiet moments when the mask falls. They tell themselves they were justified. They say you were overreacting, too emotional, too intense, too loving, but these are the stories narcissists tell themselves to avoid the truth. The truth is that they violated something sacred and will never get it back. There is always a price, a steep one. Narcissists never understand that while they tried to break you, they slowly dismantled themselves. Manipulating someone who loved them was not victory. It was the start of their own unraveling. Life only has meaning when rooted in honesty, humility, and responsibility. Narcissists abandon all of that. They trade integrity for ego, connection for control, and the chaos they create eventually consumes them from within. They distract themselves with noise, attention, shallow approval. But late at night, when silence arrives, reality comes. They remember your kindness, patience, loyalty. They remember how you cared when no one else did, how you gave what they didn't deserve, and they remember what they did in return. That guilt doesn't sleep. It sneaks into new relationships, corrupting their ability to connect. Deep down, they know who they were with you and what they are without you. They know they destroyed the best thing they ever had, and that knowledge corrodes them quietly, permanently. You healed, you grew, you faced every wound they caused and rose. Narcissists, however, remain trapped in the very behavior they refuse to recognize. Their conscience doesn't release them. Their patterns don't allow growth. Their ego blocks evolution. Something inside them died the day they tried to dominate you. Something honest, something real, something human. And no amount of validation can bring it back. That is the lasting cost of narcissistic abuse. It's not only what they did to you, it's what they did to themselves. They fractured their own character, undermined their identity. They taught themselves that hurting someone good is acceptable. And once you do that, you lose the ability to build anything meaningful. The deepest torment belongs to them. They know what they discarded. They know they chose selfishness. They know they lost someone who genuinely cared. No matter how they spin the story, no matter who they blame, that inner voice never stops whispering, "You did this. You lost them. You will never get them back." Yes, you were hurt, you were wounded, but you healed with dignity. You rose with clarity. They remain standing in the ruins of their own choices. They thought your kindness was weakness. They assumed your empathy was weakness. They assumed your patience meant you depended on them. They misunderstood everything about you. They believed your silence showed you were fragile. They thought your patience proved you had no power. They assumed you were too scared to speak, too delicate to stand tall, too naive to see their lies. But what they never realized, and may still not fully understand, is that you weren't weak. You were strong in ways their ego could never grasp. Strength doesn't always shout. It doesn't need to erupt in anger or strike back in revenge. True strength, the kind built through self-respect, discipline, and clarity, often looks calm, steady, and unmovable. And that was exactly who you were. A strength that didn't panic, that didn't waste words on someone who would never truly hear them. They thought they could manipulate you easily because you didn't react to every slight, didn't fight every insult, didn't beg for recognition. You gave them space, not because you ignored the warning signs, but because you hoped they might show character, that they might prove honorable. That restraint, that quiet dignity made you powerful in the calmest, most subtle way. Your silence was never agreement. Your patience was never surrender. You observed, listened, and allowed their true self to show itself. Time and again, they failed. And yet you stayed kind, not blind, not foolish, not weak, but unwilling to let their toxicity harden you. That is real power. Not the power to destroy, but the power to remain complete, steady, unshaken, even when facing someone trained in manipulation. And when you finally stepped away, when your quiet turned into distance, they didn't know what to do. People who feed on control and emotional drama panic when their target finally disconnects. They are used to provoking reactions, but you gave them none. You gave them space, and in that space, life did the work. The weight of their choices became theirs alone, heavier than any argument or confrontation could have been. They underestimated the force of your silence, not the silence of apathy, but the silence of someone who has seen reality, accepted it, and chose to protect themselves. That kind of quiet is decisive. It is controlled, calm, and final. It is the inner storm settling, the recognition that dignity and self-respect matter more than winning any battle. Anyone can yell when they are hurt. Anyone can strike out in anger. But it takes a different strength to feel the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, and still refuse to become bitter. That was your choice. To rise, not rage, to grow, not break. They thought they had conquered you. They assumed your quiet meant emptiness, your patience meant fear, your composure meant weakness. But in that very stillness, you were rebuilding, reflecting, processing, growing in ways they couldn't see, ways they could never understand. Beneath your calm and poise was a resolve they could never measure. You weren't trapped. You weren't powerless. You were preparing. You were letting their chaos show its true face while you quietly grew beyond it. And you did. Now they see it. They see you thriving, smiling without their approval, living without their presence, and it unsettles them. The version of you they thought they could control no longer exists. You outgrew their cage, stopped proving your worth, stopped waiting for them to see what they could never recognize, and now they live with the consequences. Not because you punished them, but because life did. Life always exposes narcissists. Life always balances what they assumed they could take. Now they feel the weight of what they lost. The realization that the person they tried to control, discard, and exploit was in fact the strongest, rarest presence in their life. They thought you were delicate, but you were unbreakable. They thought you could be replaced, but now they understand they lost someone irreplaceable. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't chase them. Your quiet, your distance, your dignity spoke louder than any argument ever could. You never wasted your strength on the wrong person. And now, finally, they see the truth. They can't undo what they lost. They can't reclaim what they destroyed. They will never again find the loyalty, depth, and integrity you embodied. You refused to play their games. You showed up with an open heart. You gave honesty when it was inconvenient. You gave patience when it wasn't deserved. You gave your best self, and they took it for granted. But this wasn't just any loss for them. This was a loss of the soul. When a narcissist encounters someone who sees them at their worst and still stays, someone who gives loyalty without condition, and they throw that person away, the weight of that decision does not fade. It sticks. It clings. It becomes a shadow they cannot escape. A quiet whisper in moments of solitude, in moments of stillness. I let the best go. At the time, they convinced themselves they were choosing something better, easier, more exciting, or more convenient. But now nothing measures up. Every connection feels hollow. Every new relationship feels fragile. Every distraction, every new beginning, every attempt to recreate what they had with you fails because they once experienced real authenticity. Now everything else feels empty. They search for your qualities in others. They chase echoes of what they lost. Maybe they pretend they have moved on, but deep down the comparison never stops. A quiet, nagging truth. Nothing, no one can replace what they destroyed. They lost someone rare, someone genuine. You didn't just offer love, you offered depth, understanding, stability. You held space for their chaos. You carried their pain without judgment. You believed in them when they couldn't believe in themselves, and they treated that like it was disposable. That is the cruelty of narcissists. They never value what is genuine until it's gone. Now they are haunted by both what they did and by what they will never have again. And the tragedy is they didn't see it until it was too late. That is the cost of crossing someone with integrity. The price doesn't show immediately. It shows years later in the quiet, in the emptiness, in the gnawing truth that they destroyed something irreplaceable. They remember your laughter. They remember your words. They remember the safety of knowing someone had their back unconditionally, and now they sit in silence, knowing they destroyed what they claimed to value. Loyalty like yours isn't easy to find, and that is what made it powerful, yet they couldn't recognize it. Their ego, their immaturity, their short-sightedness blinded them. Now they pay the price. Every failed connection, every hollow distraction, every attempt to reclaim validation elsewhere, all of it reminds them of their loss. You didn't have to punish them. Life did. Life teaches lessons narcissists refuse to learn until it's too late. The moment they betrayed you, they separated themselves from the one person who saw the best in them at their worst. No apology, no excuse, no rewriting history can change that. You carried the pain, but also your integrity. You left not with revenge, but with dignity. That is something they will never forget. Not because they miss you, but because they finally realize what they will never have again. The trust, the honesty, the unwavering loyalty, the rare connection. That kind of bond is extraordinary, and they threw it away. They are left with a void. They search for traces of you and people who can never match up. They chase ghosts, hoping to feel even a shadow of what you gave. All they find is emptiness. They let go of something sacred. They destroyed something beautiful. In doing so, they sentenced themselves to a life where your absence is louder than any presence they tried to replace it with. They lost you and will carry that loss forever. You, however, could have broken. No one would have blamed you, but you didn't. You healed. You rose. You thrived. That is the truth they cannot escape. They thought they could control you, manipulate you, silence your power. They were wrong. Real strength isn't loud. It is grace to endure, courage to walk away, and wisdom to protect your heart. You weren't broken by their games. You were refined. You didn't retaliate. You rose. Every step you take, every success, every moment of peace is a reminder of what they lost and can never get back. They live with emptiness and absence while you live with freedom, clarity, and dignity. You survived, you healed, you thrived.